So I'm here on Sanders Road in this video, and this is where the new distribution center, logistical center, on the left-hand side. You can see it on both sides of the street. And I'm just going to go down and up and back home, so this will be a short video. But again, this was owned by Allstate, and now this is going to be a logistical hub. Now, yes, you can turn these into data centers if you needed to convert them. But again, this is a logistical center. But the thing is that this place up here, and there's more logistical on the left-hand side that'll come up. On the right-hand side, you still have structures like Allstate. They still have an office right here, that white light that actually says Allstate, the Good Hands people. Now, they owned all of this, and they have, developed it, and now it's going to become a huge logistical center, and basically a growing commerce between O'Hare Airport. There's Chicago Executive Airport for small regional planes that carry logistics, but also Rockford is off of 90. You take 294 to 90 and 90 to Rockford. Rockford has a huge logistical airport. So they make most of their traffic through logistical in Rockford. And so it's a straight shot down 90 to 294 right to the center. So you can send things from here, Chicagoland, up to Rockford. And you can send them from here to Midway Airport and that. But I want to show you this place, the Glen. And I'm just going in. This condo complex. Well, the residents have to understand that this street behind me is going to get a lot of traffic. In particular, a lot of truck traffic, which is going to drive a lot of sound. And what are they doing at these residents, like over here, the rental properties? What are they doing for sound insulation? And now changing the shingles on the roof and that, tuck pointing, like I said, things that absorb vibration, absorb sound. And so these residents have an incredible amount of noise coming into them, so they have to soundproof them. So this is what the video mainly was about, was the soundproofing of these residents. So the logistical center, all the trucks moving in, moving out, all the loading and everything doesn't create a, destruction to their property value. And they could sue the industrial park if it destroys present property value. Truly, they could get a class action suit and file against them, but they have to prove where the property value is and then how the logistics center actually destroyed their property value. And they might be able to sue the village as well. But again, for the logistical center, going in, doing the right thing by them prevents any of that negative types of situation. But this should be good for this area. Lots of employment. There's a big logistical park, which I guess since I'm going home, I'll take you by the logistical park and by Chicago Executive Airport. That's not too far from here. But you can fly lots of small packages out on those little private jets. They would just be cargo carriers, not hauling people, just hauling cargo. And it would be small packages like mail, 1 pound packages, very small packages, but those private jets can be small cargo carriers carrying a lot of mail, envelopes, and that. Small logistical packages. So, again, airmail, the last mile or whatever. So, again, they can integrate, but this here, Willow Creek, Palatine Road and that, and then the 294 entrance and exit, and then if the trucks are coming from 94, which is much further east, all that roadway is going to receive way more traffic that is incredibly heavy on a continuous basis. So the underlying pavement needs to be strengthened and so on. So again, I don't know what they're planning and what these mayors are doing, and they're, the mayor and the county boards, how they're prepping for these things. Because again, it really does matter the pipeline or the infrastructure around these things to make them successful. So again, we're coming right up here on Chicago Executive, and you have McDonald's on my left. So you have tons of opportunity with the new logistical center, but you have to build the right infrastructure. And so here's the executive airport. Are they going to move more logistics through this airport? Small logistics, but move it. And that means more planes taking off and landing. Because when you get into a logistical instead of passenger, the rate of planes taking off and landing increases, and that increases the noise around it. Plus, obviously, it burns fuel as it takes off and lands. And so, again, that disperses particles into the atmosphere. So will that logistical center. That will add a lot more atmospheric pollution. And how are they, capturing that, the airports and that, in their shrubs and their ground vegetation and the different types of grass and shrubs and trees that they place around to capture those emissions. So I don't know, Chicago Executive Airport, what they've done with the blend of grass. What type of grass do they use, and how much CO2 does it capture, and how much does it respirate, how much water does it give off into the atmosphere, causing fog. Because yes, grass respirates, it breathes and releases water vapor, and so that's why you have to wet the ground, or the ground dries out, because the plants have roots and they pull up water vapor, and then they release that water vapor into the atmosphere. So how much it rains does matter. So depending on truly the atmosphere. So if it doesn't rain a lot, then you don't want things that respirate a lot, because then they'll dry out the surface. So you have to pair these things up. You have to understand the cycles, and that's why you don't do all perennials And that's why you have annuals. And so you have to be careful. You don't want too many perennials, because if your environment changes and your heavy perennials, well, they come back every year, and now you're stuck in a rut, and you have all this continuously growing vegetation, and it doesn't change. And this is why you have the California wildfires and everything, because of all those trees in the changing environment. They demand too much water, and hence they dry out the soil, and because they respirate too much, they dry out the soil, and then the soil doesn't have enough water to feed the trees, and the trees become dry, and you get the forest fires. So these are all perfect cocktails that you need to put together. These pieces of shit, these fucking coward pieces of shit that tailgate me in their cars and they drive away. These are cowards, like the guy in Chicago who gets out of his car and he shows me a knife. He has a little kid with him. I mean, these are some serious deviants. I mean, these are serious deviants. These people need to get the living fucking shit beat out of them. And I do mean somebody needs to have them come to Jesus moment. And sometimes that means my fist knocking through your face. But it seems like, because obviously in the last 10 years, the police have done nothing but harass me, and these people keep on harassing. And where is the balance? Where do they get the shit beat out of them? Where do they pay for all the trauma they cause me? Now, getting back to my point of the video, which you seem to want to take me off course and focus on violence when I focus on productivity. It seems like you've been doing this, the tailgating, to get me off course all the time, to interrupt the message so the message doesn't get out there, so you can look like the champion, so you can be the YouTube star or the Facebook star or this star or that star. And so you do everything to impoverish me, everything to bring me pain and suffering and loneliness and misery, so you can be the star. And talk about it selfish. It's, the Bible says, each to their own. And you have to earn what you receive. And it talks about fair play and not sabotaging people. That is a terrorist, domestic or international. So all these people around here are terrorists. Literally terrorists. So getting back to the LA wildfires, the forest rangers don't understand the respiration, and this is why you get a lot of fog in that, because it reaches a certain temperature and you can see what the plants are respirating. That's why the fog comes in the early morning. As the plants respirate overnight, the temperature goes down, and then you get the release of the respiration, you get the fog. So it's the dew point, but not the humidity, the dew point. So that's a cross-section of temperature and moisture, a saturation point. And so when you're looking at fog, you're not looking at humidity, you're looking at dew point. The cross-section of temperature and moisture. When it reaches this maximum saturation and you get the right temperature, you get fog. So I'm by Waltz Brothers, which is in this logistical park here in Wheeling, both sides of the street, right off the Chicago Executive. But you have to understand, when you're doing this, it's not planting one type of grass. It is changing them for the environment. And so they need to have dynamic zoning where you say you can't plant these annuals. We're going into a more dry summer, and this is where meteorologists like Hazel Martinez from ABC, a beautiful girl, crush on her, or Morgan Koepmeyer from, WGN, crush on her. But there's a lot of weather girls I have big crushes on. But that's a combination of attractiveness and sexual appeal. But again, just saying this is where the more long-range forecast and the mayors, the county boards, the state governments, they work with the forest rangers and the, the Morton Arboretum and the others, where they work together to figure out for the upcoming season what they're going to allow to be planted. Now, you have to understand your perennials are your base. And again, it's a balance between perennials and annuals. You don't want too many perennials that reoccur every year. You want a mixture of perennials and annuals. Things that you have to plant every year. And that's great for Monsanto and other seed providers. But it's not based on trying to make their business thrive. It's to create a balance between perennials and annuals where you get the proper trade-off, so you don't run into forest fires in Los Angeles. You don't run into droughts and dry out the land. That's what they have to understand with farming. That's why you do crop rotation in that. It's a balance of how much you have to put back in the land and how much you get out of the land. And you change crops to certain crops bring things to the land and take things from the land, and one of them is water. And so if you're in an arid desert, cactuses don't respirate a lot. And they store their water. So cactuses are a plant that does not really respirate. It does. Still, cactuses give off moisture, but it's very little. They keep their moisture. They store it for a dry period, and this is how cactuses, saguaro cactuses and that, can survive for hundreds of years, because they can adapt to the amount of hydration. And the reason they have all the spikes is to keep the critters away, because the critters know that the cactuses have water, and they will tear them apart and kill the cactuses. So the cactuses, through Darwinianism, have all those spikes that keep the birds and other critters away, so they can keep their water, so they can survive. And that's why they have all the little spikes. It was needed for survival, keeping the rodents and the birds and all that away from them, so they keep the water to themselves. It's for them to survive. They don't give a shit about the others around them. The cactus. So, again, you have this logistical park that's a big one in Wheeling. Now you have a logistical center which can feed into this logistical park. Really, a lot of the stuff that these industries produce, this park can get bigger in Wheeling. This industrial park can grow significantly with the logistics center now. And those logistic things, if they don't fill out, they can become tool and die manufacturing locations. They can become what these businesses are. So if they don't get a lot of logistics per se, these businesses have their individual logistics, but they can aggregate it into the logistical park. So they just do the last mile instead of long distance shipping. It goes from here into the logistical park, and then it gets sorted into semis, the Chicago Executive Airport. It goes to O'Hare, it goes to Midway, it goes to Rockford, it goes on trains, and it goes on ships or barges down the Mississippi. So that logistical center acts as an aggregation for this manufacturing park. And this is strategic here. We got Primpster Aviation right here. But this is where you fly people in to the logistical park. They should be bringing people in to do business with, to come down here. And now you need a good hotel in that if they're going to stay overnight. But there should be tours of the logistical park. The village of Wheeling should bring in people to do tours of the logistical park, not to duplicate it. They bring in people, say, from Boeing and their purchasing agents. And you're working with purchasing agents. And they come down here and they say, we have Waltz Brothers. It's precision machining. We have blank that does heat treating. We have blank that does this. So we can make a part from beginning to end. Yes, we have to import the raw steel or the raw material, but we can take the raw good and turn it into a finished good for Boeing. Or they bring in GM, General Motors, or Hyundai, or Toyota, and they bring in their purchasing managers from Woodwork Governor. They make things, but not for Woodwork. Well, Woodwork Governor purchases from here. At Waltz Brothers, we did a lot of business for Woodwork Governor. So we're a vendor. We make parts that go into their parts. So we're a sub. They have their vendors or the businesses they sell to, like Boeing, and we make parts that go into Woodwork Governor's parts. Like we made for Detroit Diesel Allison. We did the pistons and that. We did the M1, A1 tank stuff. We did stuff for Caterpillar. Again, pistons and cylinders and the stuff like that. And we did reworks. We took current ones and we redid them. Recycled pistons and components. So you deburr them, you clean them up, you deburr them, and so on. And you bring them back in, and they can shrink the size of the block. Or you recode them and you build them back out. Like retread tires. This is electric plating in that. You can replate pistons and add metal to it. Now there's new technology that you can add metal and bond it on correctly. So a new type of plating, so you can build back up the piston, so you can recycle the core. So when the piston wears down, you bring it back in, you clean it up through manufacturing, and then you send it in for electrolysis, or truly, and you adhere more material on it, and it could go through a 3D printing is another way on the surface of the piston, you would burn the new material in with lasers. So they would put a coat on the piston of these small particles of metal, and then they would heat treat it with a laser, and it would solidify it, and now it adheres to the existing metal. It's another way to do it without electricity. So they can do it through laser and the 3D printer, and then once that's done, it goes back to Walsh Brothers and gets finished up through the grinders and that precision grinding that you're just taking off a little bit of here. Then it goes through the polishing, the grinding, then the polishing, because the 3D printer is not going to make it perfect. So you have to do the finishing work, but all of a sudden you have a recycled piston. And you can do this for different parts to minimize the amount of new parts you need to keep down the costing. So again, it's refurbishing these parts. And so we did this for Detroit Diesel Allison, like the M1A1 tank transmission, refurbishing the transmission. And so you refurbish the parts. But again, if that logistical center doesn't take off, it can be another industrial park. Just because the structure on the outside of that, you have inside, and you can put up modular walls in that and section it off and create another industrial park if you want it. So it doesn't have to be a logistics center. It could be another industrial park. But you still need logistics, but then each of them run their own logistics and you don't aggregate. That's a warehousing. A logistical park is when you bring things in from, like here, you take all these manufacturers here, whatever they produce, and you move it into the logistical center there, and they do the sorting and breaking up, and then they move out from there. So you have FedEx over here, and that FedEx office is an aggregator. It sends out its trucks, they come in, and the trucks empty into this FedEx, and then they aggregate everything into new loads on different types of trucks and dispatch those out for long range, for distance. They're going to wherever, Saudi Arabia. But again, you have to understand this. So this is the supplier for the logistical center. So where is the aggregation coming from for the logistical center? So you have to understand these things. And so they bring in the purchasing agents, and they come around and look at the industrial park for wherever. You can be manufacturing for the petroleum industry, Aramco in Saudi Arabia. They need all kinds of new parts and replacement parts. Here's the FedEx aggregation center right across the street, and you think FedEx planes would be taking off and landing small logistical planes from Chicago Executive Airport. The FedEx aggregation breaks it down in things that need to go airborne, just in time, need to go airborne, would get put on FedEx planes, small FedEx planes, private small logistical carriers, and taken to Rockford, flying to Rockford and landing, because it needs to be there in an hour. So it's, I think, less than a 45-minute flight to Rockford. And then it aggregates at Rockford into a bigger bundle, and then gets on a bigger plane and sent somewhere else. So that's when it's time sensitive. So that's like organ transplants. You know, the organ is time sensitive. So you have these logistical centers. I'm going by a FedEx truck. I originally was going to work on FedEx at Vanguard. Vanguard has FedEx 401k. And then I thought about doing planning for FedEx employees, financial planning services, because I know their 401k platform. But here's the logistical center, right? I mean, the Chicago Executive Airport. And I just showed you the the manufacturing part. And I told you the mayor of Wheeling and the county board, it's in Cook County, and the governor needs to be working with them to target purchasing agents from different organizations to come and take tours of the logistical park, introducing them to the capabilities, and they can make up a virtual tour that they can send to them, but they would invite them physically in to walk through the shops, to meet the owner of the small businesses. Like you go to Waltz Brothers and you meet Larry Waltz, the owner of Waltz Brothers, and he becomes an ambassador. That's what John Vogel ended up being for Vanguard. And people would meet with John Vogel that wanted to do business with Vanguard. He was an ambassador. He was a recruiter of organizations to place their money with Vanguard. He gave consulting, but he also was a recruiter for them, recruiting organizations to, it could be that they want to move their 401k over from Boeing to Vanguard, say. I'm just giving you an example. I don't know where Boeing has their 401k. I'm just giving it because they were in the Chicagoland area. But again, he was a recruiter. And so he would recruit them to place business with Vanguard. He was their matriarch, the founder of the organization, and he stepped down from running the organization to recruiting. That's what Jack Welch should be for General Electric. He should be a consultant to them and a recruiter of business for them. And so he goes to countries like China and talks to them about doing business with General Electric for their hydroelectric plants or whatever it may be. And they put motors and they put these generators in the Yangtze Dam. General Electric did. But this is what Jack Welch could have done, that he was doing something separate. But Warren Buffett, as he steps down, he becomes an ambassador for Berkshire Hathaway, and he still goes and he meets with dignitaries and that, and he sets things up, and then he hands it off to the current CEO, and they get somebody who's willing, ready, and able to move forward. So Warren Buffett tees them up, wines and dines them, and the new CEO of Berkshire Hathaway knocks it out of the park, finalizes the business. Because Warren Buffett doesn't know the nuts and bolts and so on, his is now being the ambassador for Berkshire Hathaway. But this is what the mayor, the county board, and the governor are supposed to be doing. Same thing in Elk Grove. In their industrial parks and these, that they're supposed to go out, find the decision makers, give them an introductory, bring them down here, and bring them for a tour, bring them into businesses, show them the ISO standards or whatever they need for their industry and how these businesses can meet. But talk to this about a source platform, a single source platform, where you have certain parts and the ecosystem is all here between, say, Wheeling Industrial and Elk Grove, and they can send business back and forth, and they can work with these industrial centers in a networking situation, and they come down and we can be a one-stop shop in Illinois for, you need to build out an engine. We can build out all the components for the engine. So these people, and it gets all aggregated together and bunched together, and then you get shipped the package. And so you don't have to outsource it all over the world. So multi-channel, that's multi-channel marketing, but multi-channel to complete a engine, or maybe you're making a vacuum cleaner and they can make all the components for it, and now you just need to ship all the components, and they can be bundled together in one box, the components, and they ship it to an assembly center, and the assembly center puts it together. So here's the industrial park. So it's called Palwalkie Business Center right there. This is the industrial park. And so they can collaborate. But these people, your local representatives of your government, have no idea what they're doing, in my opinion. And I know I rip on them because I'm very disappointed in their performance. And my life is garbage because they don't do their job right. They allow the dirty, rotten scoundrels to succeed. And here, I'll go around, and this is Waltz Brothers. I'll just show the sign right here, put the lights on it, and then I'll zoom in here so you can see. Here is Waltz Brothers. And then you can see their offices and visitor parking, shipping and receiving. But the whole point is, it's been here at the beginning of this industrial park. It's one of the founders of this industrial park. Truly, it is one of the founding members of this industrial park. And it used to own all the land around it. And then they sold it off, and other people developed these businesses. They should have never done that, in my opinion. But again, that's hindsight. But this Palwalkie Business Center networks together, and they should have their own Chamber of Commerce. Oh, the Palwalkie Business Center should have their own Chamber of Commerce inside the Wheeling Chamber of Commerce. Because a lot of the Wheeling Chamber of Commerce, they don't really feed into the Palwalkie Business Center. But the people in the Palwalkie Business Center tend to be integrated. They do different aspects of different types of manufacturing to make finished goods. We don't have assembly here. So again, that logistical center, part of it can turn into assembly. So those warehouses can be assembly plants, and they can take all the components from here and put together an engine and send out the finished engine block to Chrysler in, where is it, in downstate by Rockford. I forget the community it is, but they can send it out to the Rockford plant. Or we have the Rivian, and they can make all the different parts for the doors and for the windows, so on. And then you have a glass manufacturer. I don't know if there's any glass manufacturers here. And you're looking at creating this, and then they send it to the assembly plant, and that Chrysler has one downstate here, but again, there's others, and so they can assemble it here and send them the finished good, the transmission, the engine, whatever, or they can send them just certain components. But the logistical center, part of it can turn into assembly plants. So if they wanted to do trucking logistics and they're looking for an exit strategy, then assembly plants, those big structures, can be turned into all fine. Rivian can open up there and they can put assembly plants for cars inside those facilities. They're big enough and they're just big empty boxes, and so they're modular, and you could put, if you want it, you could get a John Deere assembly plant, and we could make Bobcats for Caterpillar here and assemble them in there so they can become assembly plants. You make all the components here. Some you'll get from outside sources. They move into the logistical center now as an assembly. It has different large assembly plants. So again, you can bring Tesla in there and make, their small Tesla. Tesla can come out with a motorcycle. BMW has a motorcycle. Honda has a motorcycle. And if not, you can buy Kawasaki. They have vehicles too, but those are mostly small trucks and so on, and not heavily into the passenger business, passenger car. So Tesla can acquire to vertically integrate. So if Tesla hasn't, they could, and that would get them into the hybrid market, where you'd be half electric and half, diesel, or half gas, or half hydrogen fuel cell, half electric, half hydrogen fuel cell. And so you get into these different forms of hybrids. So I'll go back by the industrial park, which is the new logistical center. And you have to have a vision for the integration. So again, this is what it's supposed to be about, not getting on the road and dealing with these pieces of garbage because they can't drive correctly. This is why I'm very big for the self-driving cars. And Japan wants it because they want traffic to flow. They don't want accidents that cause congestion. So if auto insurance companies don't move into another value proposition, countries like Japan, they don't care. France and other countries are heavy in the insurance industry, not Japan. And they're heavy in the manufacturing. They produce steel, one of the largest steel producers. Why? Because they're in the heavy manufacturing. It's like South Korea. They're not into the insurance business. They're into Hyundai, heavy industries, and LNG, appliances, and so on, Samsung. So they're heavy in steel and metals and manufacturing, and they produce parts and so on, not insurance. So, and they want accidents and negativity to disappear altogether. They don't care about that segment. That's not where they're focused, and nor should they ever be focused on there. They need to perfect what they're doing. So insurance companies like Allstate and that are in auto, they have to adapt. So it's coming, and you have to adapt and overcome, or you go obsolete. And every day I can see reasons for the last 10 years of the extreme tailgating why they should take away everybody's driving privilege and just move to self-driving vehicles. Because we can't have this bullshit. And they already come up with all this stuff with quantum encryption and everything. So don't think some terrorist is going to be able to hack a vehicle. That's not going to happen. And I put out stuff on quantum encryption, making things impossible to hack. So That's not going to happen. We need to get rid of the loose cannon, the human. Because these people are raised like animals. And animals need to be animals, and humans need to be humans, and they're not supposed to be the same. Why do you think God talks about stewardship with humans? Why do you think I show you, and they've already proven, we don't come from chimpanzees. We're genetically separate. We just were raised in the same environment, and because of that, we acquired some similar adaptations. Because we didn't originally have clothing and other things. But we're a separate, unique species that has nothing to do with them. We just coexisted in the same environment, and to survive that environment, we had to pick up similar traits. Have you ever seen a black kid, like, go to Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, the new one, and you see the black kid, and then you see his mother and father and his daughter, and they're raised in a very high-end, well-educated community, and they act and talk very sophisticated, like white people, because they're better educated. It has nothing to do about race. It has everything to do about sophistication. And as they get more sophisticated, they pair up. Their language is clearer, more precise. Their actions are more refined and everything else. That's what naturally happens with refining them. Anyone. Watch Jen. She was highly refined. She used just the right amount of shampoo, just the right amount of, makeup. I mean, perfect amounts. Highly refined in her actions. And that is all from education. She is not a pig. And this is why the Bible prizes wisdom. You're highly refined in your actions, what you do and how you do them. And it makes an economy very well. Because people don't overeat. They're not drawn to excesses. Truly, they manage themselves better. They do. There's higher accountability within the family in that. Like my friend Rob Betts, DA. He went to grad school with him. Best friends. His family owns a vineyard in France. He runs a pharmaceutical company here in the United States. And Rob got ticked at him. And he got too drunk. Now, that wasn't a falling out. That was Rob holding DA accountable for overdoing it and putting himself in a risky proposition. Because he doesn't want him to get overly drunk and make himself vulnerable. Say if Rob's not there, he can be easily rolled, easily mugged. Mugging is rolling, whatever it may be, easily killed. He doesn't want to see his friend become highly vulnerable. So he wants them to drink responsibly. He doesn't want them to go out and get a DUI. And he doesn't want him to crash his car. He doesn't want him to do these things. Rob cares. And so my reaction was, I understood. He opened the door, he put his foot in the back, and he said, "Get out of my car, you stupid drunk." Sending him the message. And we hung out many times after. And DA was more appropriate with his drinking habits. Reminder to be more mindful. Don't overdo it. He cares about him deeply. They have an extremely good friendship. And sometimes it's about accountability and holding them accountable. Rather, you get your feathers ruffled like a parent to a child than the extremely big damage happening. You're supposed to protect them. That's the point of the Bible, which you don't understand. The whole point of it was to protect you from the catastrophic, to teach you and educate you through these catastrophic situations so you don't end up experiencing these catastrophic situations. So God is watching to see how godly you are, seeing if your mind is clicking and you're getting the wisdom. And if you can't, then you can't be stewards, and revelations needs to come true, and you need to be disposed of. Like it or not, you need to be ended. You're too great of a threat to everything. And so he's watching if you can understand, and he's sitting back, as he said, watching your interactions with me, how you treat me, how you interact with me, if you disrespect me, if you respect me. He's watching all your interactions, depriving me, putting me down, belittling, threatening my life, beating me up, torturing me, disrespecting me in every way. He's watching what type of people you are. Have you evolved, or are you just pieces of garbage? And if you're pieces of garbage, then you're a threat to all existence. And you're at the top of the food chain. Those that are given the much have the greatest responsibility. You must be removed. You must go extinct. You're too much of a threat to everything else. So if you prove you're too much of a threat to the existence of everything else, then you need to be terminated. That's the point. So he sits back and watches on how you interact with me. And threatening me, as I've told you over all these years, and doing these things you've done to me, you're not winning, you're losing. And you're losing unbelievably. See, let's look at inside these buildings, and you can get my point. So you see in there, they're just open structures. So here's some stuff here. But if you see behind, there's just open structures. So these can be assembly plants. These can be carved up to be, modular offices or manufacturing plants. Assembly or manufacturing. So just not logistics, it can be broken up into many types of businesses. So they're on both sides of it. So it could be part logistics, and we can open up Rivian manufacturing plants. So, or Tesla can open up here, or whatever it may be. We can bring here Kawasaki and their train division. They're in Nebraska, but they have a 20-year backlog. Something ridiculous. Years. My friend Jimmy worked for them. But really backlogged in there. So they need to expand. So we can make train cars. Now, getting them from here to the tracks, well, you can put them on semi-trailers and ship them out. So it's not a big deal. The roadways are big enough. The train tracks aren't far away. So, again, you can do boat assembly plants. We don't have boating. You can assemble all kinds of small boats. Truly. The parts can be manufactured all over here, and then assembly plant for all types of boats. Small drones, all the, like the military predators, but let's talk non-military. They're using them in movies and everything else. So we can make all kinds of drones for motion picture companies all over the world, and for YouTube people. And so they can make all the components. We need the software, and that comes from other places. There's Google in Chicago. They can design the software. And so we can make drones. So there's a lot that can be done with this you-friendly group. So here's the group right here. You can see them right there, clear as day. And this is who's doing this park. And so, again, this can be subdivided. We can bring bellies here. They're in Franklin Park, but they can expand and do more exercise and strength training. They own Hammer Strength. If you don't know Hammer Strength, it was developed by bodybuilders. These bodybuilders got together and they started making their own strength training equipment. And Joe Weider got more into supplements. These bodybuilders got into strength training equipment. And Hammer Strength is awesome strength training. I used to look for gyms that had Hammer Strength. It is very good, high-end strength training equipment. And we can have a Hammer Strength manufacturing or assembly plant, and they can manufacture components for Hammer Strength around here. So Elk Grove, Wheeling, the other industrial parks. So there's a lot that can be done. But I don't know what your leadership is doing, and I don't know how they're interfacing. Like I said, the Palwalkie Business Center, that used to be the Palwalkie Airport. Now it's the Chicago Executive Airport. And this is the Palwalkie Business Center. So there was the Palwalkie Airport and the Palwalkie Business Center. Now, again, they need their own chamber. So just the people inside the Palwalkie Business Center. It's a component of the Wheeling Chamber of Commerce. It's a subcomponent. So again, they can work with the Chicago Executive Airport. We can make all kinds of small plane parts. Truly, all kinds of components for small planes. They have a place over here where they do work on small planes. So again, we can make replacement parts for small planes. So again, aftermarket parts. Again, there's a lot of ways this can go. We can make aftermarket parts for O'Reilly's and so on. So there's a lot of ways that you can spin this to build it out, but you have to have a direction and a plan, and you have to go deep into that. Why? It gives you security. If you get too thin, now there's a trade-off. When you go too deep, you become too concentrated, and you can be vulnerable. So you have to watch your verticality to your horizontal. So you want to build out both vertical and horizontal, but you're focused on going deep. So you want to be more vertical than you are horizontal. Horizontal makes you too thin in any particular endeavor. So you want to have strong roots. You want to go vertical. And you have strong roots, but not overly strong. You start building out the horizontal or the complements. Complements, not substitutes. Substitutes, something that replaces you. Complements are something that goes with what you have. You have a hamburger. That's the core good. The complement is the ketchup, tomatoes, lettuce, bun. Those are all complements for the hamburger. The hamburger is the core. And so you're building out complements. You have your core, and then you have your satellite or your complements. And I need my girl. I need my complement. That Bible says two become one. Well, I need my physical girlfriend. I pray for one every night. For 20 years. I had some prospects, but in the last 10 years, that seemed to dry up. First time in my life, no prospects. I used to have a good bench that were possibilities. Now, I don't get it. So, anyways, so you have this industrial park, you have the logistical center, now you have Milwaukee Avenue and Restaurant Row, and my brother Carl this morning talked about how there really wasn't any, there is all these quick serve restaurants around my house, but no full serve. There's Jameson's, which he didn't see, Jameson's Char House. That's really one of the few full-serve restaurants. There is Illuminati's Pizza, that is a full-serve, but that's farther down. So most of it is Chipotle, Burger King, Taco Bell, Dunkin' Donuts, Starbucks, all quick-serve restaurants. We don't have a good mix. Now, here I'm on Restaurant Row. This is Wheeling's Restaurant Row, but it has Bob Chin's, which is one of the greatest restaurants in the United States, and at the time before, at its height, it was one of the top grossing restaurants in the world. So, and it main core is seafood. Now, Surf and Turf, having a good steak would be a very good thing for Bob Chin's. But you have Yee's, James Yu's, I should say, Y-U, Yu's Mandarin. Y-U is you. Like my friend James Yu, his last name is Y-U. So you have Yu's Mandarin. It's part of this Restaurant Row. I used to work here at Tuscany's. We had an Italian restaurant here. We also had La Francais, a high-end gourmet French restaurant. That's not here anymore. We have a quick serve in the Winter Circle, but it's lost its prominence and it's moved more towards quick serve than higher end restaurants, and they need to bring back that high end. Now, D'Agostano's, that's a sit down restaurant, a pizza place, decent pizza place, but that's kind of mid-level. Bob Chin's is upper mid-level. La Francais was high level. You have Rise and Shine, and it's the only breakfast place right here. Now, Yu's could do dim sum and do Chinese breakfast. But again, that's Restaurant Row, right? Not much to it. There used to be a Weber's Grill down the road I used to go to, and it was parked down this Milwaukee corridor, and it used to have a great burger, and I used to go to it. But they closed that down. They turned into a Mexican restaurant, and I think that stumbled as well. But I like Weber's Grill. It still operates in Chicago, and we make Weber's Grills. But the funny thing is, when you walk into Weber's Grill, they don't make a connection to the manufacturing of the grills in the Chicagoland area. Truly. And even when you go into the restaurant, you can actually buy stuff for grilling. A small gift shop, but you can actually see videos of different types of Weber's Grill, and you can buy little stuff for grilling. And then, yes, they have like Charlie Trotters to go. They have Trotters to go. It was at a separate location than his fine dining. He didn't want people coming to his fine dining location to pick up food or deliveries going out of his fine dining location. So he moved. He had one location. It was only for fine dining. He had a separate location called Charlie Trotters to Go, highly successful. That was just pickup and delivery, like a Domino's location. So he didn't want to mix in fine dining. He didn't want those people showing up at the door. He didn't want delivery drivers going out that kill the ambiance of his fine dining experience. God rest his soul. And so he set up a location. And he failed the first time in Vegas, but actually, if he didn't have his downturn, he opened up a location in Vegas. He started to become a winner. The first location he ended up not doing right and closed down, but the second location he went back, was starting to be highly successful, but then he got into his alcohol and he literally drank himself to death in disparity. And Chicago losing their great ones. And so, again, he did a good thing, and I used to be protective of him. And believe me, well, let's just stick to the business side of it. I appreciate his work and his output, what he accomplished on that side. On another side, I had a problem with him. But on that side, so he earned my respect, and so I used to help him with his staff. I helped him with his bookkeeper and doing all his numbers. Yes, his bookkeeper was my friend Rick, and I used to talk to her all the time about improving her bookkeeping services. And her bookkeeper, she was the bookkeeper for Charlie Trotter. So I helped him with a lot of back-end financial P&L and all that stuff through her. Indirectly, I never even interacted with Charlie, but all these different ways I was helping Charlie Trotter be highly successful. It's like Ditka's. I was helping Ditka's be successful indirectly. I was educating his staff. I was doing other things, helping the restaurant indirectly because of the people I touched and I influenced them, and it helped them. So I was working behind the scenes, and Mike Dicka never knew. And I used to know his old GM from Jimmy. Anyways, but it doesn't matter. Anyways, they didn't know. I kept all this stuff that I was doing to myself. So when I saw Dicka, and I did at times, he sat across from me when I was with Erica. I took Erica to Tavern on Rush, and we went into the VIP room, and Mike Dicka came in with some girls, and we were in the same place. We see each other, but we didn't interact. But I didn't want to go over, hey, Mike, I helped you in this way and that way, and you just don't know about it. And that wasn't the point of it. It was good for Chicago, and a rising tide raises all boats in the harbor. And if they get better, Chicago gets more prominent, Cook County, Illinois. And I've been doing all this, trying to get this incubator going, that this can be highly successful, moving in the right direction. So getting back to it, are they going to bring and go out there and go after purchasing agents and bring them in and give them a tour and show them how we can make these components for them, these different businesses within the Palwalkie Business Center can be a one shop, or it can be a large component that we do all the components, say for Detroit Diesel Ellison for the transmission. Somebody else does the components for the rest of the vehicle. But again, it's like GE engines, doing the components for a GE engine or Rolls-Royce engines. So for their aerospace, or for the components that go into their generators, that, for the hydroelectric plants or whatever it may be, or the geothermal energy, or making stuff for the nuclear power plants. We got the most, but we can also manufacture stuff that goes into the nuclear power plants. So again, and then we can supply France and many other places. So again, we can be a spoke, we can be a hub. And so it depends on where we're going, but there has to be a strategic plan, and then the state has to figure out how it integrates together. So it doesn't, how do you say, cannibalize itself. So one part of the state isn't cannibalizing another part of the state. So that's the governor working with the counties, and the counties work with the local governments, and they make sure there's this non-cannibalization, that there's competition, but it's to keep each other sharp than destroying each other. So there's difference between competition that excels each other and competition that destroys the other. And so we're talking biblical win-win situation. Knife sharpens knife, you both get stronger and can compete better in your industries. So again, how is that working? How is our mentorship from our leadership working? And then overall, the President of the United States is supposed to be working with the governors, making sure that we work together as a good ecosystem, smoothing it out between states, making sure that we work together as a good ecosystem, that the 50 states and U.S. territories work together in harmony. They're competing in a way, but also they want to be harmonious. And that's what the president, through the U.S. Congress, is supposed to do. And that's why he meets with senators and people from the House of Representatives. Usually the whip, the minority, and the majority whip, both in the House and in the Senate. They speak for their people. So he deals with those four individuals. 2 from the Senate, 2 from the House, the majority minority from the Senate, the majority the minority from the House. They deal with their members. Now, there's some things where he has to deal with individuals directly, and he has agendas, but those agendas, if you watch Reagan, he worked with the Democratic leader, Tip O'Neill. And so it went from Reagan to Tip to Reagan, and they worked through each other to their members, who they represent. So they didn't do a lot of individual. Reagan didn't do a lot of individual talking, and it made him efficient at being president. He's more looking to talk to Boris Yeltsin, and he's looking to talk to Margaret Thatcher and so on, other leaders of the world. If he's running around talking to this senator, that House of Representative, so narrowing down the 4 people, and he already has the vice president in the Senate, and the vice president in the Senate is supposed to be talking to the majority minority, really taking it off his table a little bit further. So he's left with the House. But it's not that he isn't involved, but he's left more burden dealing with the House, which is more micromanaging. The House, there's only 50 senators, right? Or 100 senators, 2 from every state. So they have it at more of a macro level. Senators are more macro managers. The House of the Representatives are micromanagers, just like our state Senate. They're macro managers. The House of the Representatives, there's more of them, they're more micromanagers. So you have the upper house, which is a macro manager, and the lower house, it's a micromanager, closer to the constituents, so they can feel the small shock waves, where the Senate, they don't feel those small shock waves. It has to be 7 or 8 on the Richter scale to register for them. So that's what the House is supposed to do, be closer to the people. That's why it's representative by population. And so it's supposed to feel those, the pulse of their people. And the Senate's more of a higher level, macro managing. So they have their components. And then we have the the executive's the president, the judicial branch. And they watch these components and make sure they play fair together. And that's where you get the attorney general, kinda, but he's appointed as well, so he's not as impartial as the Supreme Court, but they're appointed as well. But they have long terms, so they can be more partial. So Judge Roberts favored Obama, so he voted with him on the Affordable Care Act. So he could be more impartial. So, again, you have to understand these things, but what is our leadership doing for us?